So picture this. You are sitting in like a quarterly all hands meeting.
Oh, yeah, we've all been there.
Right. And the vice president of strategy is up on stage, pacing back and forth with a microphone. And they're talking about, I don't know, synergizing our cross-functional paradigms.
Or leveraging dynamic bandwidth.
Exactly. And they sound profoundly confident, right? They've got the hand gestures down perfectly. But as you sit there in your folding chair, you're just thinking to yourself, I don't think a single word of that actually meant anything.
It's just word salad.
Yeah. And if you have ever been in that exact scenario, you're not going crazy. You are actually experiencing a documented, heavily researched organizational phenomenon.
You really were. And it goes far beyond the realm of just everyday office annoyance.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at a structural failure in how organizations process reality.
Right.
So today, we're unpacking a really fascinating research synthesis by Dr. Jonathan H. Westover. It basically pulls together decades of study on a concept that academics formally refer to as organizational bullshit.
Which is just amazing that it's the actual academic term.
It is.
And we have a pretty dense stack of sources for this deep dive today. We're going to break down, the psychological definition of this behavior, why it does measurable damage to our mental health.
And our companies? Yeah.
Right. And most importantly, how some of the most complex organizations on Earth are actively, engineering it out of their systems.
Yeah, because to fix a systemic issue like this, you first have to define it with absolute precision. People often conflate this behavior with, just everyday corporate lying.
Like covering up a bad sales quarter or something.
Exactly. But there's a very strict dividing line here. To understand the mechanics of what is actually happening on that all-hands stage, we have to look back at the philosopher Harry Frankfurt.
Oh, right, his foundational work on this.
Yeah. He established the core difference between a liar and a bullshitter. So a liar is someone who knows the truth and takes deliberate action to hide it from you.
Okay, so they actually have a relationship with the truth.
Right. A liar respects the truth enough to want to conceal it. But a bullshitter operates in a completely different reality. They're entirely indifferent to the truth.
Wow.
They just do not care if what they're saying is factually accurate or entirely fabricated, as long as the words serve their immediate goal.
Which is usually just to look competent, right?
Exactly.
Let's ground this in a real-world scenario for you listening. Imagine you are lost on a road trip. If you ask a liar for directions, they know the right way to go, but they intentionally give you a route that drives you off a cliff.
Right.
But if you ask a bullshitter for directions, they haven't even looked at a map. They have no idea where you are. They will confidently narrate every turn, just pointing out landmarks that don't exist, just to maintain the illusion that they're this expert navigator.
That captures the dynamic perfectly. The performance is the point.
They aren't trying to hide the true path. They just consider the true path completely irrelevant to the performance.
Exactly. And building on that framework, the recent research adds the next critical piece of the puzzle. It shows that true organizational bullshit always involves an element of intentional concealment.
Wait, but if they don't care about the truth, what exactly are they trying to conceal?
Well, they're actively concealing their indifference.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, the speaker is putting immense effort into hiding the fact that they simply do not care about the underlying facts. They manufacture this aura of decisive expertise specifically to mask the void where, their evidentiary foundation should be.
Because they need you to believe they've done the rigorous analysis.
Precisely. Because they haven't.
And when you look at how this plays out across different sectors in our source material, it takes on very distinct flavors. Like in the technology sector, the research points out that this often manifests as wildly overconfident predictions about software.
Oh, constantly. You have leaders making guarantees about artificial intelligence timelines with literally zero underlying code to support it.
Right. And then in management consulting, you see it in those heavily branded, formulaic frameworks that get pitched as universal solutions to every problem, totally ignoring local context.
Yeah, and in corporate communications, it shows up as those sprawling, vague messages to stakeholders. They use 1,000 words to essentially avoid making a single measurable commitment.
So what's driving all of this? Why is it everywhere?
Well, the underlying driver for all of these manifestations is structural pressure. We have built corporate cultures that demand constant certainty from our leaders.
Right. They have to be the visionary.
Exactly. We expect executives to be immediately decisive, even in volatile, ambiguous situations where having all the answers is just a logical impossibility.
So acknowledging the limits of your own knowledge feels like a massive vulnerability.
It really does. So rather than saying the data is unclear and we need more time, which is the truthful answer, they resort to truth-indifferent communication. They project absolute certainty because that is the currency the organization rewards.
Okay, so I want to pivot here because if this cognitive labor is draining our teams and leading to bad decisions, why does it hit us so hard personally?
It's a great question.
Because it would be very easy to dismiss this as just a quirky reality of modern capitalism. Like, we all know the corporate game is a bit theatrical, but the sources reveal this isn't just a pet peeve.
No, not at all.
It acts as a severe organizational stressor that leaves employees completely drained.
It causes genuine harm. And to understand the psychological toll, we have to look at this concept called psychological contract breach.
Psychological contract breach.
Yeah. See, when an individual accepts a job, they aren't just engaging in a transactional exchange of labor for a paycheck. They enter into a complex, unspoken psychological contract with their employer.
So there are underlying expectations.
Right. Employers carry this inherent expectation of good faith, honesty, basic integrity, and, frankly, a shared reality with their leadership.
Okay, that makes sense.
So when that expectation is violated, like when you realize the people steering the ship are communicating with complete disregard for objective reality, it triggers profound psychological distress.
Yeah, one of the massive studies in our stack found that this specific style of communication breeds systemic cynicism, and it directly leads to counterproductive work behaviors.
Oh, absolutely. And other research links a supervisor's truth-indifferent behavior directly to negative mental health outcomes in their subordinates.
But I want to push back on this just a little bit.
Sure, go ahead.
Because we all live in a world of advertising and exaggerated marketing copy. We know the game. Why does encountering this in the workplace cross the line into like clinical mental health strain?
Well, it crosses the line because of a psychological mechanism known as procedural justice.
Okay, procedural justice. Walk us through that.
Let's break down what's actually happening in a workplace. Decisions are being made every single day that dictate your workload, your team's funding, and your career trajectory.
Right, super high stakes stuff for an employee.
Exactly. And when you recognize that those high-stakes decisions are being driven by unsupported assertions and empty buzzwords rather than empirical evidence, the entire environment begins to feel fundamentally unjust.
You realize the rules of gravity just don't apply anymore. It doesn't matter how good your data is if someone else can just invent a more confident-sounding reality.
That is the core of procedural justice breaking down. The process by which rewards and resources are distributed is broken.
Oh.
Yeah, if promotions and strategic directions are awarded to whoever can spin the most elaborate fiction, the workplace literally becomes unsafe. You can no longer trust the system to protect you or reward actual merit.
And compounding that lack of safety is the sheer exhaustion of what researchers call cognitive labor.
Oh, the cognitive labor is massive.
Let's slow down and explore that because I think everyone listening has felt this specific type of fatigue. Walk us through the cognitive labor of sitting in a room with a truth-indifferent leader.
Okay, think about the mental bandwidth required to process a simple directive in a healthy organization. Your boss says, we need to shift our strategy to target this demographic.
Simple enough. You process it, you make a plan, and you execute.
Right. Now, put that exact same directive into an environment saturated with organizational bullshit. Your boss gives the directive. But before you can even think about executing, your brain has to run this complex secondary background process.
Because you have to evaluate the claim.
Yes, you're sitting there thinking, is this based on market research? Did they just read an airport business book? Are they covering up a mistake from last quarter?
You are constantly filtering everything you hear, trying to distinguish genuine strategy from hot air.
And then, on top of all that, you have to calculate the political risk of how to respond without sounding insubordinate.
Oh man, that is so true.
That continuous high-alert filtering process drains just an immense amount of cognitive energy.
It really is like running a heavy software program in the background of your computer all day. Eventually the battery is just going to die.
Exactly.
So once we acknowledge that this behavior is actively draining our workforce and destroying the integrity of our decision-making,
Which it is.
the obvious question is, how do we stop it? Like, how do you force people to care about reality?
Well, the research transitions here from diagnosing the illness to exploring real-world tactical interventions, and they're highly actionable.
Let's hear them.
One of the most potent strategies is the implementation of transparent communication frameworks that essentially force individuals to show their work.
And the pharmaceutical giant Merck is a great example in our sources, right?
Yeah, Merck provides a masterclass in this approach within their drug development pipeline.
Because developing a new drug is an environment where you simply cannot afford false confidence. I mean, billions of dollars and human lives are on the line.
Which is exactly why Merck altered their presentation structures. They instituted a requirement that explicit limitations and uncertainties had to be communicated right alongside the promising data for any pipeline candidate.
Oh, wow. So if a scientist or an executive was pitching a new compound for funding,
The structure of the meeting prevented them from simply declaring it a guaranteed blockbuster. They were procedurally required to present the specific trial data and then explicitly state what they did not yet know.
that is such a powerful shift. It reminds me of like middle school math class. You couldn't just write down the final number on the test. The teacher made you prove the steps you took to get there.
Exactly.
If you skipped a step or made a leap of logic, you lost points. By forcing their teams to explicitly document the gaps in their knowledge, Merck basically ensured that unsupported optimism couldn't hijack their resource allocation.
But for a framework like that to survive, leadership has to aggressively model the behavior. You can't just hand out a new meeting agenda and expect culture to change overnight.
Right, the bosses have to do it too.
This brings us to Intel and their historical culture of constructive confrontation.
Constructive confrontation.
Yeah, at Intel, challenging an unsupported assertion wasn't viewed as a hostile act. It was an organizational expectation that superseded hierarchy.
So even the lower level employees were expected to speak up.
Absolutely. If a junior engineer was in a room and heard a senior vice president make a sweeping claim without evidence, the culture did not just allow them to ask for the data. It demanded it.
But let's look at the reality of human behavior for a second. If you suddenly tell everyone in a standard corporate office to start aggressively interrogating each other's facts, you aren't going to get rigorous debate. You are going to get a deeply hostile, defensive environment where everyone just hates coming to work.
Oh, you will absolutely create a toxic environment unless you first establish a bedrock of psychological safety.
Okay, this is where the work of researcher Amy Edmondson becomes critical.
Yes. Psychological safety is the shared belief that an environment is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. It basically means employees know they can acknowledge a mistake, admit ignorance, or challenge the superior without facing punitive retaliation.
The Virginia Mason Medical Center example in our sources illustrates this beautifully. They implemented a patient safety alert system.
Right, and the fundamental rule of this system was zero punishment for reporting an error or flagging a safety concern.
Which is huge. By removing the fear of blame or termination, they basically dismantled the survival mechanism that drives defensive bullshitting.
Exactly.
If a nurse or a technician knows they won't be fired for saying, "I made a calculation error," or "I actually don't know how to operate this new monitor," they feel completely safe telling the unvarnished truth. The need to project false competence simply vanishes.
When you remove the threat, you remove the need for the armor. But fixing a single meeting structure or implementing an alert system, those are tactical moves.
Right, they're short-term fixes.
Yeah. If we look at the long-term horizon, how does an organization fundamentally alter its DNA? How do you build an immune system strong enough that the truth indifference doesn't just seep back in the moment the company hits a bad financial quarter?
The sources highlight this concept called distributed accountability, and I think the mechanics of this are brilliant. It removes the burden of fact-checking from the shoulders of a single manager and spreads it across the entire organizational network.
USAA is a great example of this.
Yes, the financial services company. They lean heavily into procedural justice by utilizing cross-functional panels. So if an executive wants to launch a major new initiative, they cannot just pitch it to a friendly department head who happens to like their communication style.
Right, no backroom handshakes.
Exactly. The proposal has to survive a review panel made up of individuals from entirely different departments, people who have zero vested interest in the executive's ego.
Those panels evaluate the proposal strictly on its evidentiary merit.
It operates almost like a human blockchain. Think about it. In a blockchain, a single user can't just alter the ledger and invent a new reality because the entire network has to verify the data.
That's a great analogy.
At USAA, you can't push through a project based on a bullshitted market assumption because a completely detached panel from compliance or engineering is going to verify the ledger. The claims are forced to be grounded in reality because they have to survive cross-examination from people who only care about the facts.
And that structural check is vital for neutralizing confirmation bias. Another organization pushing the boundaries of distributed accountability is GitLab.
Oh, their approach is intense.
It is. They operate on a model of radical transparency. Nearly all of their organizational communications, strategic decisions, and internal discussions are documented and stored in open digital repositories.
Let me challenge that, though, because having every single document and decision open to the entire company sounds a little like a surveillance state. If everything is public, doesn't that create a culture of paranoia where people are terrified to brainstorm or share half-formed ideas?
It is a delicate balance for sure, but the goal of radical transparency isn't surveillance. It's the democratization of truth.
Okay, how so?
Well, when the repositories are open, it creates an environment where making statements with total disregard for the facts becomes a massive professional liability.
Ah, because everyone can see it.
Exactly. If a leader makes a baseless claim in a strategic document, literally any employee in the company who possesses the actual data can see it, leave a comment, and respectfully challenge it. It prevents leaders from sequestering themselves in echo chambers where their assertions just go completely unchecked.
The transparency acts as a disinfectant against empty rhetoric.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. It shifts the power dynamic from who has the highest title to who has the best evidence. But beyond structural rules and open repositories, the research points to something even deeper: the professional identity of the workforce.
Yes.
Like, the Mayo Clinic is cited as an organization with an incredibly deep-rooted culture tied to patient care and scientific integrity. When an organization's identity is that strong, it basically functions as an intrinsic immune system.
The motivation shifts entirely. Think about it. In the USAA example, the motivation is extrinsic. It's, I need to ensure my data is accurate because the cross-functional panel will catch me if it isn't.
Right, an outside force.
But at the Mayo Clinic, the motivation is intrinsic. It's, I will ensure my data is accurate because I am a scientist. And fabricating certainty violates my core values as a professional. When your self-worth is tethered to scientific accuracy, engaging in truth-indifferent communication doesn't just violate a company policy, it violates your own identity.
That's so powerful. But we do have to address the dark side of this. What happens when an organization's DNA rots from the top down? Like, what does it take for a massive legacy corporation to rebuild its psychological contract with its employees when the culture has completely lost its grip on reality?
Historically and tragically, it often requires a catastrophe. The research synthesis uses the Boeing 737 MX crisis as a really grim case study. That organizational failure was driven, in part, by highly optimistic, truth-indifferent assertions regarding system safety profiles and pilot training requirements. The culture allowed unverified confidence to basically override engineering realities.
And when the physical reality of those unsupported claims finally caught up with the corporate narrative, the result was fatal crashes.
Precisely. And that tragedy forced Boeing into a severe existential cultural recalibration. They couldn't just issue a memo about being more honest, you know.
Right. A memo wasn't going to fix that.
They had to systematically dismantle the old incentive structures and explicitly position engineering accuracy, the rigorous admission of uncertainty, and the protection of dissenting voices as career-critical life-or-death behaviors.
It is a sobering reminder that communication integrity is not just a tool for making meetings more efficient. In industries like aerospace, healthcare, or infrastructure, the tolerance of organizational bullshit is quite literally lethal. Rooting it out requires an uncompromising structural commitment to reality.
It really does.
So, bringing all of this research out of the academic synthesis and into your daily life, why does this matter for you, listening right now?
Yeah, what's the takeaway?
By understanding the precise mechanics of organizational bullshit, that it is not just lying, but an active, concealed indifference to the truth, you can begin to protect your own mental energy.
Absolutely.
When you are sitting in that all-hands meeting, you can spot the performance for what it is. You can recognize the cognitive labor that the environment is forcing onto you, and you can give yourself permission to step back and conserve your bandwidth.
And perhaps most importantly, you can monitor your own behavior.
Yes. The next time you feel the structural pressure to project absolute certainty about a project you haven't fully researched, you can catch yourself. You can be the one to break the cycle by saying, I don't have the data to support a conclusion on that yet. Let me do the work and report back.
It's a profound shift in mindset, really, to realize that you do not always need to possess the answer. You simply need the integrity to admit when you don't.
And as we look toward the horizon, the research synthesis leaves us with a glimpse of a rapidly approaching technological frontier, which is Wild. Organizations are currently exploring how natural language processing and advanced AI models could be deployed for the algorithmic detection of this exact linguistic behavior.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
So we are talking about an automated, AI-driven bullshit detector running in the background of corporate systems.
Exactly. Researchers are developing ways for AI to monitor internal communications like emails, reports, chat platforms to detect the specific linguistic fingerprints associated with truth and difference.
Wow.
Yeah, the algorithms can flag excessive reliance on jargon, the use of unfalsifiable claims, or markers of extreme confidence that lack any linked supporting evidence.
Just imagine the behavioral shift that would cause. Think back to that executive pacing the stage with the microphone. What happens to the daily culture of a company when you are typing out a message on your internal chat system and a red squiggly line appears under your sentence? Not because you misspelled a word, but because the system is auto-flagging your statement with a warning that says, claim unsupported by evidence.
It would force a complete reckoning with how we communicate professional competence.
It is a wild concept to consider the next time you are asked to synergize a paradigm. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the mechanics of reality in the workplace. Keep questioning the buzzwords, protect your cognitive energy, and we will see you next time.